a year and a half. And I got introduced to DIY through another mentorship. So as Kyle has mentioned, I've gone through a few different mentorships. All of them have guided me to being here today. And as Kyle said, closing my first deal a few weeks ago.
Love it. Love it. And before you got into these groups, Wendy, tell us a little bit about what you were doing for work prior, because I actually don't even think you and I have even had that conversation. Like, I know the Wendy since you joined our program and the things that go on in your life since you joined us, but I would love to just hear your background and, what ultimately brought you to entrepreneurship and real estate specifically.
You didn't hear about what I was doing before because before the mentorship, I was home. I was, in the hardest profession in the world, which is being a mom, a new mom. But prior to that, I was in movie production with HBO, and I worked with them for about 10 years. And prior to that, I was in insurance sales. And then about 6 years, well, my kid is 9 now. So about 9 years ago, I started trickling out of the corporate space and eventually becoming a stay-at-home mom. And so venturing into entrepreneurship was just one of those things where my kid got out of diapers, it was time to do something. And so I started searching what I can do in the beginning to bring income in, bring my own income in to my family.
Amazing. And so you have how many kids? You have just one or two?
I have two. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. And that's interesting.
Like 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. Okay, so I want to talk about that because a lot of the, obviously you've seen it in the communities you're part of. I speak to a lot of clients who are new parents, new fathers, new mothers, right? What advice would you give to those who are juggling I would say, I don't want to call it an obligation. It's not. They're your kids. You love them, right? Obviously.
They're my kids.
Yeah, of course. But when you're excited about entrepreneurship, you're excited about building a business, and when it requires so much of your energy and time, do you have any advice for people that are new parents that are trying to get into the same boat as well? Because I think you've done a phenomenal job being able to do that in your own life. I've noticed that and admired that.
Yorkie was a very efficient way to handle your time during the day. And you mentioned it as well to us in the community, and that's time blocking. When I say that my greatest job of being a mom, it also included a lot of life changes. I moved from New York City. I bought a house in New Jersey. Then I sold my house, bought another house. I also have another business, which is a daycare with my younger sister. So being able to time block, I think is probably the only way I keep my sanity.
Yeah, and committing to those time blocks, right? When
Actually shutting down and moving to the next thing is the only way I keep.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Easier said than done. I have my puppies that you've clearly heard barking in the background as we started, and they are my kids. I look at them that way, and they're responsible. I can't even imagine the type of TLC that's required for kids. So you guys are superheroes. I tell that to every parent that I meet that's in the entrepreneurial space. Awesome. And then, so you obviously you figured out you have time now that you're home. You have the opportunity to invest in your knowledge and education while you're being a mom, stay-at-home mom. What ultimately drew you to real estate? Was it just because of the generational wealth play, like all the buzz around just making money through the power of real estate, and it felt comfortable for you? But would love to know that.
I think it was just the enthusiasm of our other mentor, which is Ramel.
Yeah.
So I pretty much saw him on Instagram, and he wasn't really talking about real estate, more about generational wealth. And so when I initially went and saw his video, it encompassed all of these things on how to how to become generous, how to have generational wealth. And so I guess the answer to that question was more about me feeling like I wanted to regain that, I guess, feeling of being able to contribute to my family. Like when you're used to being in the corporate world, I was always used to making my own money and then having to make that decision to become a stay-at-home mom, you kind of lose a little bit of yourself in that. And
Mhm.
so I was just trying to find a way to bring something else financially to my family. And so when he started talking about generational wealth, that's kind of what why I gravitated to the mentorship. And then since being in there, I was introduced to many different things like self-storage and then real estate. And then just through the iteration of the mentorship, it kind of like got into, I can really wholesale.
Right. Yeah.
So
No, it was interesting because I think when you came to me, I don't even know if you were looking to do wholesaling at the time, right?
yeah,
And that's what happened with a lot of the crew that came at the time that you did, is that I think investing was the focus, and then we started realizing, well, wait, we need, obviously capital. We need to understand the sales and negotiation side of this business, which was a huge learning curve that we'll talk about. All of us go through it, by the way. Um, and yeah, I think what the skill that I love about wholesaling, and I think you've gathered this, is you can always use wholesaling as a tool to make money in real estate. Eventually, you'll get to the point where you will be able to invest through the active capital that you're making through wholesaling, but it's always something you can use to convert and monetize your leads. And now you've also developed the skill of how to create a pipeline for yourself
right,
of consistent deals. That's the
right.
thing I love about it. And obviously, we're going to start working with you more on the back end side of the office together. We've talked about that, and that knowing those skills, it's like you'll never have a problem sourcing a deal for yourself ever again.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that's the thing that DIY brings to the table. Many of the things that you just said, right? So I get introduced to real estate and I get introduced to ways to acquire real estate.
mm,
Um, but I guess that's where I transitioned over to DIY because what you guys did was tell us how to actually wholesale. All of those nuances that you need about like understanding the sales pitch, understanding building
right.
relationships. I don't think I've ever had a problem with that skill. Like I said, I used to sell insurance, so
Yeah.
I don't think I had a problem. But one of the things that was so so important to me and beneficial was those scripts and understanding
Yep.
how to do it, like in real life.
Right. And applying it to the real, and it's a skill that you are going to be so happy that you have now, because I've seen so many people get burnt out by the idea of wanting to wholesale and get excited about getting into this business. And then they realize, like, okay, it is sales and marketing at the end of the day. And
Yeah,
if you're not going to take ownership of learning those skills yourself, you better find someone that you can partner with that's going to do it. And
yeah,
so kudos to you, because that was never your, like, you always went full steam ahead, never stopped taking action. I was just learning, like you said, the nuances of this industry and the word, and just, the verbiage, the
yeah,
process, right? And now that you have that down, it's going to be rinse and repeat, which is the goal, right?
yeah.
So that's a great transition into, let's talk about the deal, right? I understand how you sourced it, but if you want to share really quickly, like, and it can be completely agnostic to DIY, just more so talking about that sales engagement for your first lead, right? From the moment it came into your CRM, right? Would love to just know the story behind it and the journey that you took this lead through ultimately. And we'll probably poke into some, tips and tricks from there. But let's start with the day that,
Well, we
yeah.
came into DIY as a team. I had a team. We had our leads dropped into our Podio. We were instructed how to be very do attack them quickly as soon as they come in, give them a call. But like everybody in wholesaling will tell you, it's all in the follow-up, right? So this particular gentleman was one of the original leads that I purchased through DIY.
Yep.
At the time that I called him, he wasn't ready to sell. I think he was going on vacation or had to do some family stuff. He told me, yeah, give me a call back in 6 months. I'll let you know. I'll see where I am. And I set my alarm on Podio and followed up in 6 months. And when I called him, he was back home and he was like, "Yeah, so this is the property I want to sell." So that I actually kind of feel like my first lead of getting it under contract wasn't that hard. I had already spoken to this guy. He already had the idea that he wanted to sell. I follow up when I said I was going to follow up, and he was like, "All right, well, you called me when you said you were going to call me." So we started conversing about the deal. He's a he has about 600 doors. He's like an investor. Like he has a lot of property. So everything that I was saying to him wasn't new. And for lack of a better word, I wasn't going to be able to bullshit him. Like he knew the deal, he knew what I was doing. And so I guess for him, the motivation was he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to sell his own properties. He's retiring. He had a lot of doors to get to offload, and he just didn't want to do it. So I come in and I build a strong rapport with him, and there you go. I got it under contract. I think the part about like understanding like how to evaluate that property, there was a lot of things that you guys taught us, but I think with this particular deal, it didn't really even come into play. Again, he's a seasoned investor.
Right.
So the amount that I offered him, he probably looked at it and was like, all right, I'll do it for, $5,000 more. But I had offered him a really low amount. So the $5,000 more kept me still in a good position to
Yeah.
wholesale.
Price anchored for sure.
Yeah.
So before we go any further, because there's so many great things out of that, Wendy, that don't even know if you even realize the impact of it. But I think two things that stick out to me. First and foremost, the money is made in the follow up, right? There's the fact that you just had so many people would have given up on that lead, right? It's a common lead that we get into, whether it's clients, I've received them from my end, where they just don't look super motivated at first glance, but you took the effort to give them a call regardless. He gave you his timeline. He was very forthcoming about it. And you used the software that you had access to remind yourself when the time is right, right? And so that lead was out of sight, out of mind for months.
Right.
But you did exactly what you should do as a good businesswoman and salesperson, which is follow up at the right time and not forget about it. And that's what first stuck out to me, is that most people run away from opportunities or don't even make the calls to lead because in their mind they just believe it's not worth their time. And some leads aren't, right? We're not going to say every lead is worth calling. That can be a whole different deep dive and discussion. But I think for the sake of this takeaway that you've made very clear is that this was a lead that probably wasn't something that you were worth spending time on, and you ultimately converted to $7,500, right? And so that's one thing that's a great takeaway for anyone that's new. Make sure you have a process for managing your lead pipeline and organizing yourself and not letting leads slip through the cracks. First takeaway.
Right.
Second is that this was a tenured investor, right? You are very new to the game of real estate, not business, not sales. You made that clear. You know how to, navigate tough conversations,
Yeah.
but still someone who has been in the industry and knew the market way better, right? You still were able to get them to a great price, a wholesale price, and convert a lead to a qualified buyer. So those two things, especially for people that are new and oftentimes like are just either nervous for making the calls, they don't take the action for God knows what reason. But when you have a qualified seller, whether you're working with us or any other lead gen company, just make the call, build the rapport, and try to use that motivation that you ultimately found, right? You dug deep, just didn't want to handle the process on his own. He's probably got a million and one other things to do. So you found the true reason of why he wanted to work with you. That's what's going to get deals done at the end of the day. So I wanted to make that super, super clear, those 2 points. Cool. So you got, first and foremost, great sales execution. How roughly, from the moment you re-engaged after those 6 months, how long was the sales cycle from there? Do you remember when you got that deal under agreement and ultimately when it closed?
Yeah, it's on my board right here. Probably like I guess 3 months. But I think like in the middle process, the part where, I'm still trying to build my buyer's book, and that's one of the things that was a little bit of a delay, was finding the buyer. But for him, contract was in, and he was like, whenever you want to do it. So I immediately went down and took a look at the property. I ended up having lunch with him meeting his wife. Like, I think like one of the things that made this process a little easier is that though I might not have had all of the skills for wholesaling, um, I didn't really handle it as a business transaction, I guess.
Right.
When I actually met him, we talked nothing about the property. We talked about, where I'm from and where he's from. And so the property he wanted to sell was in the background of the conversation.
That's amazing.
So Yeah, so I mean, I think it was like 3 months from the day he signed the contract to the day I picked up my check.
And he's someone that also is looking to sell more properties, if I understand that correctly, right?
Yes, I have a call with him today at 3 p.m.
Yeah, so there you go. Look, like some people overcomplicate the fact of, and I know I'm not calling you out just because you and I have had this conversation before, but you're one of many people who get caught in the minutia of like real estate verbiage,
Yeah.
underwriting, right? The comps, like all. It's like at the end of the
Oh
day,
yeah,
this.
that drove me crazy.
Yeah, of course, and it does. It's hard in this. It's hard in this current market, but I think the big takeaways that we've gathered here is like you really didn't do anything real estate related to the, it's more sales and business
Yeah,
acumen execution, right? You just handled yourself well. You gave the guy a great sales experience. You were personable, and you just guided him through the process as a trusted partner.
yeah.
And so that's what's so great about this story, Wendy, is that like, and again, another reason why I encourage people to get into real estate. If you want to be a new entrepreneur, if you want to get into real estate investing, wholesaling is just such a great way to get in, to sharpen your skills, understand the industry, and now you're going to have these skills that are building a solid foundation for your business growth. Um, was there anything, Wendy, about that deal that you wanted to share? Like anything that you would recommend during the buyer qualification process? That because I know you did talk about how that was an area of growth for you, and it still is, right? Um, was there anything during that disposition process, finding that buyer, qualifying, that's worth mentioning to anyone that might be newer to dispositions?
What I could say is that when you are dealing with a cash buyer and they're a true cash buyer investor, it's really easy. When you're dealing with, people that are just, they're not really seasoned cash buyers or even really serious, you get a lot of back and forth. So for this particular deal, I dealt with a lot of back and forth with buyers, and the buyer that bought the property is
Mhm.
actually not the buyer that I had a contract and I had an appointment with on the day that he signed the contract. So basically, I don't know if you remember that, like I was driving down there to meet the buyer that I met online,
Mhm.
and then he backed out of it like that morning, but my blocked out day was already scheduled to go to this property. So
Right.
when the other gentleman called me, I was like, sure, because I already had that time frame. So I drove out there to meet him. And he was waiting at the property when I got there. And he walked the property and literally he called the, I guess, what do you call the inspector? He called
Yep.
his inspector while I was there at the property. So the guy came in like 30 minutes.
Wow.
Because he looked at the property and pretty much gave him the green light. And he was like, all right. So another thing that I've learned through DIY and through all my mentorship is to be prepared. So I actually had the updated contract um, with me at the time. So I kind of just like got an empty one and went with it. So when he was ready to pull the trigger, I just needed to sign his name and have him
That's
sign it.
amazing. Great, great work. Yeah, you didn't even tell me. I don't even think you told me that story. That's crazy.
I
Well,
did. I was freaking out. I called you. I was like, the guy didn't call. He's backing out at the last minute. I call you so many times. You probably don't even
no,
remember.
yeah, honestly, it was probably like right, but I think I remember some like right before my wedding week. Maybe
Yeah,
that's what it was because in like
right. Maybe
May.
that's what it was. And I was like, he backed out, and it was like so close because he was willing to put a deposit down and everything. And so I was just like, oh, I thought I
It's
was back to square one, but this other guy just came out of the woodwork.
oh, thank God. So yeah, you had a guardian angel. You just did the work. That's what it is. It's not luck. It's just you've worked so hard. That deal could have been 100K. It could have been 1K. It doesn't matter. It was just needed to get that off your back, and now the confidence will be there going forward.
Yeah,
Amazing. And then okay, cool. So that's another good takeaway, guys. Everyone that's brand new is, you hear me talk about this a lot. Is like dispositions is just so crucial to the success and sustainability of your business in this current market. So always be networking with buyers. If you ever have downtime, for whatever reason, you shouldn't as a new business owner, but if you do, just keep networking with investors and buyers. That's all I can say. So I guess for those, as we wrap up in the next 10-15 minutes or so, Wendy, for those that are joining our community or maybe just joining the DIY services, do you have any tips for someone who is looking to close their first deal and just how to best work with us, right? Because I think one thing that was clear to us when we started working with you is we learned a lot about how we can better serve brand new wholesalers and investors, right? Unfortunately, you came in with a new wave of people that we never had a coaching or mentorship element to it, right? We created the inner circle for your group, which is so interesting. And now we have a community. So I guess I can thank you guys for that. But we learned a lot about how we can work better with newer investors. So since you were a part of that growth, both with us and we were a part of yours, do you have any just tips for someone looking to work with us that you'd recommend they're aware of before engaging with our team?
The minute you just asked that question, the first word that came to my mind was question. So I know
Yes.
a lot of people in the community, and pretty much all of my mentorships will be like, yeah, she is always on the forefront. She's always asking a question.
You are. It's good.
Because for me, it's like I do work very strategically. My time is valuable, and if I can ask a question and just get the answer and not have to Google it for 3 hours, just
Yeah.
ask a question. We're on a Zoom call, or you're talking to me about something, text, and I'll throw another question in there, and it just might get answered. You never know. So I think like the best way to take advantage of your membership with DIY is to actually use DIY.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I have a few other people from the background of the team, like my girl Dina over here, and she'll
Yeah.
know. I text them all the time and just ask questions. And one of the things I'll say about DIY is that everyone always responds. Between you and Logan walking me to picking up this check, even on my way to pick up the check after the deal was completely done, I I text Logan on how I should pick up because the place is about an hour and a half away. And I'm like, the deal is done. Do I need to drive an hour and a half away? And he gave me some recommendations. He's like, you can always have it wired, but it's your first check. So, I would probably pick it up. And then it was a great advice because I went to pick it up and I got to shake hands with the title agent that I was communicating with throughout the process. So there's another relationship built,
Yeah,
right?
and it
And
feels like you've been to war now, right?
yeah,
It feels like you go to
yeah.
battle with these people.
So now
It's
she knows there's a face and I know who she is.
right.
And it probably would have been a little cold ending if I just had the check wired.
Yeah,
So
and the good thing is you're gonna,
DIY is the answer.
the goal, right, is you're gonna do more business with them. These are people that you're building relationships with, and not just doing deals with them from a wholesale side. As you start building your, market brand, excuse me, your business and your brand and your market, and you start, getting into flips and more complex real estate deals and transactions, like those trusted contacts at these title companies and attorneys, if you're an attorney state that you're working with, they're going to be best friends to you, right?
Yeah.
Because if you treat them well and you communicate effectively with them, they're there. They're there to support you. They want you to
Your
have
wholesaling business is bringing them business. Like if you're not
correct.
wholesaling, I mean, I'm sure they're getting paid in other ways, but they're also getting paid through your efforts. So they,
Absolutely.
they'll definitely want to have a relationship.
Yeah, they want to give you a white glove service.
Yep.
No, and that's important. And I want to say one thing that to give you some more kudos and your flowers here, which is yes, you may seem from your end that like you ask a lot of questions and you always say it tongue in cheek like it's annoying. Like no, like
I know, I know.
you pay us and you take advantage of the subscription that you have with us, and you're comfortable getting vulnerable, Wendy, which I think is so important, especially for anyone that's in a mastermind program. There's even times that I've realized I pay for mastermind groups and I haven't finished all the modules or I haven't attended all the coaching sessions that they have to offer. And there's times I have to check myself and be like, listen, I'm paying these people a lot of money. I should take advantage of all the things that they have to offer and just ask away, right? Because there's a lot of people, and it's corny as heck, but there's a lot of people in the community that I speak to in private settings that have very similar questions. And I tell them, guys, just ask the questions. Look at Wendy. She's a great example of it. Like get in front of people, because you're also going to build your brand within the community as well. So yeah, I support that. And I can't further emphasize more the importance of, being active in the communities that you're a part of, regardless if it's us or any other community. So thank you for sharing that, Wendy.
Yeah.
Amazing. And I guess Anything else as we close off? I want you to plug your stuff for sure. I want you to be able to share where people can get in touch with you and just a little bit about Devlar Holdings. But before we do that, any other final, tips and tricks for a new wholesaler looking to get their first deal?
I'm glad you asked that, Kyle. So the tip that I wanted to, and I actually was, I'm really grateful that you chose me to highlight, because there's one thing that the whole process started was legacy, right? Being able to leave something for my kids, being impressed by how the mentors that I were encountered to were affecting the community, right?
Right.
So one of the things that I've encountered, I'm looking, I have a whiteboard in front of me that has all the deals that I've ever put under contract. And I actually crossed them out red, red, red. This last one has a green. And I have another green. Actually, oh, I have a closing today at 4 o'clock. My
Get out of
second,
here.
yeah, my second deal closes today at 4 o'clock. That one is going to be wired because that's from Indiana.
Nice. Amazing. And is that the one?
That's what the close today at 4.
Amazing. Amazing. What was like a 5K, 4.5K deal or so? That was
Well, this one is 35K, and the reason is because it was originally 7,000, but I ended up having to split the profit with the agent that helped me bring the buyer to the table. And
yes.
then just last night, the seller was supposed to receive 90K, and when they gave me the HUD, it was short $96.
Oh, interesting.
And I called the agent, and basically what she told me is when we put it under contract, we had a little bit of a delay, so taxes changed, like taxes are prorated daily. So
Yep.
the original amount that we got the loan for and everything was correct,
Yep.
like 7 days later, it's now $96 difference. So
Okay.
what I did was, because all of it is about your branding, for any business, whether it's wholesaling or selling sneakers.
Yeah.
People look at your company needs to trust and believe in you. So my contract with this seller was for 90K. And so I called the agent back and I'm like, what's happening? And she told me. And so what I did was I took out 90K from the profit I'm going to make today. I mean, $96
Yeah. $96.
of
Yeah.
the profit that I'm going to make today and put it over to the seller's take home, so that when L is done and they'll have their 90K. Now, the seller didn't know that I did that, but when they found out, they were extremely happy.
Yeah. Right.
And this was like blown away that I would actually do that. But that 96K, I know she's going to keep me around to sell those other two properties,
Right.
whether it's something that's happening actively or passively. I'll be in the background to do
Right.
that. Those are the things you have to do as a business. And so that kind of got me off guard from what I was trying to say. But what I was saying is the tip that I want to give, and all of these deals that I have been dealing with, these are all people who are investors, like
Yeah.
real investors, not like a regular homeowner that's just selling. So all of them were much more knowledgeable than me. And one of the things that I had to keep saying in my head is, if the investor can tell me this is how much I want for the property, right? This is how much I want.
Hmm.
Um, why can't I say this is how much I want? And
Right.
so with that thought process, it allowed me to offer the prices that I wanted to offer and not be afraid like, oh, they're not gonna accept it or whatever, they're not gonna do this. I don't know if they are or they're not, but in my mind, I was like, why is it that he or she is allowed to tell me what they want and I'm not allowed to tell them what I want? So that kind of fuels me when I ask questions or tell them what I want.
No, it's and like reverse wholesaling we call it, right? And that's why I always tell people like don't ever sell yourself as a newer wholesaler as someone you're not. Be open to telling them that, hey, you're newer to the market, you're newer to the area. You don't even have to say I've only been doing this for XYZ amount of time. Just say I'm newer to the market and I'm looking to better understand this market and I'd love to bring you consistent lead flow in exchange for some help and guidance on where I need to land on price. And just you got to just do that to best learn your market, best learn your numbers, and it's a great way to also build credibility with investors and that are doing deals at a high level. One quick thing I'll tell you to give you some advice on, not advice, it's only more beneficial for you. Go back to that seller and don't be afraid to ask for a testimonial, right? Because you want to build a website. You want to build your social media presence. Devlar Holdings is your brand now. It's your business. So go and ask like, hey, we'd love to, whatever, however you left off, just ask for a quick little testimonial. Cause I did that at the beginning stages and it went a long way. And
Yeah, I
I'm
definitely will do that at
my
the
brother.
call. You
Yeah.
mentioned that on the last module, so I'm definitely going to do that.
Yep. Definitely get some testimonials from them.
Mhm.
Well, amazing, Wendy. So we're super excited for continuing to help you. I'm glad to hear you got another deal closing. So that's 2 deals in the last, 40 days or so for, a little close to 11K, which is awesome. Let's keep it moving. And then anything that as far as how we can best, or the community can best get in touch with you, if you want to just plug your Instagram and Facebook or email.
You saw me have to email you that yesterday because I
Oh,
totally I'm lacking in that area, and I'm gonna get on it. But I am on Instagram and I am on Facebook. On Instagram, it's Wen_legacy, so WEN_legacy, and on Facebook, it's just Wendy Martinez. And on Instagram and Facebook for my business, it's Devlar Holdings LLC. Um, I'm starting to really do more of my businesses under Devlar instead of under my personal account.
yep,
Um, now that I'm building some rapport with a lot of the people on Facebook, I can kind of switch over. And
yep.
of course, I think like we have an ability to communicate on our
Community
platform.
on the platform. Yep,
The question does I get pinged, and I thank you everybody who left great comments after Logan shouted me out.
yep.
Yeah, that's where you can reach me. And
Love it.
I just, you know, it is very important to me to share some of these experiences because I was there about a year and a half ago. It's still only a year and a half. Like there's so much more to be done.
Right.
There's somebody there's somebody there now, you know?
Right, 100%. Every day I'm speaking to new people trying to close their first deal. So your story is going to resonate extremely well with the community, Wendy. I really appreciate you coming on here and giving us an hour of your time. And we look forward to closing more deals. Let's go. We got a second half of 2024 to finish strong for you. Very excited
Yep.
for the move forward. So,
I'm
all right,
costing today, so.
yes, let's go. Let's keep following up, keep getting the bag. And I'm excited for our next customer spotlight team, which will happen in August, at the start of September. We will share who the guest speaker will be towards the end of the month, and we look forward to seeing you on the next customer spotlight. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye now.